know that from our audience that some of you already have houses in Portugal and you want to keep spending time there. And lots of you have been asking us about the different kinds of visas that you can get in Portugal now that Portugal's or the UK is out of Europe. And you've also been asking us about how you can move permanently to Portugal legally and the aspects of that, and also what are the legal steps to buying property in Portugal. So there's lots of legal aspects to your move. And obviously in the chamber we have several specialist law firms. Here today in the event we have Edge International, who are next door, and we also have Eversheds FCB, who are a large Lisbon law firm. So in order to explain some of these basic legal concepts to you, we have invited our friend and colleague Miguel Lorena Brito, who's a partner at Eversheds Sutherland, to come and just run you through the real estate investment, post-Brexit visas, and the non-habitual tax regime from a legal point of view. So, Miguel, perhaps you come and join us.
Hi everyone, my name is Miguel Brito. I'm a lawyer. I'm a partner at Eversheds Sutherland in Portugal. And today we are here to walk you through some of the options, some of the residence visa options that are now available for non-European Union residents that wish to become Portuguese, that wish to become residents in Portugal. As Christina told you, we will also share a few short notes on the property buying process in Portugal, in case some of you plan to actually buy real estate in our country. Okay. One of the most well-known visas is a so-called golden visa. And what is the golden visa? The golden visa is a temporary residence permit that is actually awarded as a result of an investment that is made by a non-European Union resident. The golden visa will be granted you for a period of 5 years. First, for an initial period of 2 years that can actually be renewed for subsequent 2-year periods. It has some minimum stay requirements, but I would say minimal stay requirements, because the golden visa, once awarded, you just have to stay in Portugal for the first year of the visa for 7 days, and then for the subsequent years for 14 days. So there are minimal stay requirements involved in this visa. And also the visa can be extended to family members, so family reunification is possible. One of the family members applies for the golden visa, gets the golden visa, and then operates the family reunification. So this is basically a visa based on an investment. And what are the eligible investments to get the visa? Well, first you have sort of capital investments, 1.5 million euros that you can make through a bank deposit or invest in the share capital of Portuguese companies, for example. There is also possible lowering a little bit the threshold to 500,000 euros if you invest in investment funds and even in venture capital. With a minimum of 500,000 euros, you can apply for the visa. There are also other ways to get the visa, like making investments that create jobs, be a direct investment to create 10 jobs, or 5 if you invest in a company. But I would say, and from experience, and although we know that investment in especially in venture capital is becoming more frequent, we know from experience that the most popular form of investment that until now has been used to obtain the visa is the real estate the real estate investment. Typically, this investment has a threshold of €500,000 to buy a property in Portugal. But there are other amounts that can also be considered, depending on the location of the property and the specific the type of investment that you are making. It is also possible to achieve the threshold for the golden visa with €350,000 and even €280,000, depending on the location. It's not that common. It's not easy to enter into the golden visa with this lower amount, but it's still possible to get the visa with this lower thresholds. One thing that needs to be taken in consideration, if you actually plan to invest, is that the golden visa for the acquisition of residential property is only possible in less populated areas. This means that if you plan to buy a house and use it as an investment to get the golden visa, places like Lisbon, Cascais, and even most parts of Algarve will not open you the door to the golden visa if it is a residential property. There are other sorts of properties, including tourist properties that can be used for that purpose, but not residential properties. Okay, and how do you get the golden visa? What are the steps that need to be taken in order to get the visa? Well, first thing is to get a Portuguese taxpayer number, what we call the NIF. Usually this involves getting the appointment of a tax representative in Portugal, although this can be avoided by now by registering at a electronic notification system. But if you are not familiar with these sort of systems, you appoint a tax representative in Portugal once you apply for this taxpayer number. Second thing, and very important, you open a Portuguese bank account to which the funds that you invest need to be transferred into Portugal. This is crucial because if you want to apply for the visa, the bank will actually need to issue a certificate confirming that there have been funds transferred from abroad into Portugal to a Portuguese bank account, and that those funds have been allocated to the investment under which you are applying for the visa. So this is very important. No payments, no direct payments from the UK or from elsewhere into the developers or into the sellers. They need to come through a Portuguese bank account. And that account obviously needs then be used to make the investment. Once you make the investment, you have bought the shares, you have bought the units in the funds, or you have acquired the property. You submit an application to the immigration services, for which there is an initial fee around €500, more or less. And once this is done, eventually you will receive a notification to have a meeting at the immigration authority. The steps before can all be taken while you are still living in the UK or elsewhere. But for this is the first moment in which you have actually to be physically present in Portugal to attend this meeting at the immigration service. Once the visa is awarded, you will get a notification to pay the final fees. The final fees for the admission of the visa, we are talking about €5,600 for the main applicants, and then the residence card is issued, which means you have a temporary residence permit to be in Portugal. The card is issued and you collect that card. These are the costs that I've already told you, the initial fees for the submission, and then the final fees that need to be paid in order to get the residency card. There is also some advantages and some benefits after this 5-year period to which the permit refers to. Because you have been able to legally reside in Portugal for 5 years, this will allow you to meet one of the requirements in order to get a permanent resident visa after the 5 years. And even if obviously all of this has other requirements, and even to apply for Portuguese citizenship if that is something that you want to consider. But the golden visa is obviously not the only door into the residence in Portugal. There is a residence permit that is usually known, and although the law does not refer to it as it, nor does the official entities refer to it as it, but it's the D7 visa. The D7 is a different sort of visa. It does not require, like the golden visa, does not require an investment, but is more a passive income visa that is based, it can be awarded to people who are in a position to evidence to the Portuguese authorities that they have stable income sources and they can support themselves, and so they can submit an application based on such evidence. Unlike the golden visa as well, this application is not submitted to the central services, immigration services in Portugal, but rather to the consulates of where the applicant lives. This is typically a visa that has been used in the last years for retired citizens, foreign citizens, and individuals with some wealth capacity that want to live in Portugal. The steps is quite simple. You need to go to the consulate of the place where you live, and you want to submit your applications with all the documentation. The consulate will tell you that needs to be submitted. The visa will then grant you a 4 months period, allow you to get into Portugal and to apply for the residence permits. But now the law has changed and it actually already provides you a pre-approval of that residence permit. So if you use the visa, go to Portugal, submit the application for the residence permit, you are already allowed to stay in the country for as long as the procedure is ongoing. Just to outline very briefly, because we are talking about the ones that we mentioned now, the golden visa and this D7 visa. They are totally two different approaches to getting a visa in Portugal. As we saw, the golden visa requires an investment, but once you make the investments and if you meet all the other requirements, you will get the visa, period. It's clear. The requirements to get the golden visa are clearly set in the law. So unless you have no problems with the authorities, whatever, you will get the visa. This is not the same with the D7, because the D7, as I told you, is submitted to the different Portuguese consulates throughout the world, and they actually have different requirements and different criteria and make different assessments on your personal condition. So one works more automatically, I'd say, although it requires an investment, but once you make the investment, the visa is awarded. With the D7, it does not necessarily work like that. The other difference, which is not a small difference, are the minimum stay requirements. Because as I mentioned, the golden visa you can only live in the country for 14 days a year. If you're not planning to actually live in Portugal, it works out nicely. But if you do not want to live in Portugal and if you apply for the D7, you need to spend most of your time in the country, because if you are away for more than 6 consecutive months, the visa can actually, the temporary residence permit can actually be cancelled by the authorities. So golden visa is typically used for people that want to have the visa, want to have the ability to use the benefits of the visa and travel throughout the Schengen area, but do not necessarily want to live in the country. The D7 does not work like that. Okay. If you, assuming that, as Christina mentioned, some of you might be interested, if not already owning property in Portugal, being interested in acquiring property in Portugal, just a very few short notes on how to buy real estate. These are the main steps you can see there. The typical steps that are taken in order to acquire real estate in Portugal. Only the last two are actually mandatory by law to operate the transfer of ownership of a property from the seller to the buyer. But the ones, the reservation agreement, the due diligence, the promissory agreements, they are also common and should also be considered. This reserve fund, if you acquire from with intervention of a real estate agent, or if you acquire from a developer and not necessarily from an individual owner, you will most probably be asked to execute a reserve form, by which the property is taken out of the market. You are giving a period of time of exclusivity to negotiate the terms of the transaction. This reserve form usually involves a payment of a deposit, a fixed deposit that can go from 10,000 euros to 20 or 30,000 euros, more or less. We usually recommend extreme care when you are asked to sign these reserve forms, especially when you are dealing with professional and skilled developers. These reserve forms are sometimes very detailed and extensive in regards to the terms and conditions of the transaction. This means that you will be not in a very good position to negotiate at a later stage the payment terms and other conditions, the warranty and all of that in the promissory agreement or even in the final purchase agreement. So be careful with what you sign. There is also another point or two other points that always need to be considered when executing a reserve form. Usually these reserve forms do not foresee any sort of due diligence on the property. And you want to be able to have some time to do due diligence on the property. So it's important to amend the reserve form and to include that you will be able to have some time to look into the property papers, property documents, and assess title. This from one side. On the other side, it's very important that the form is clear about the conditions for the refund of the deposit, because as I mentioned, this reserve usually involves the payment of a deposit, and it's refundable in general. But you want to be able to know exactly when will you be able to be refunded of the deposit that you are making. Typically, we would advise that the document foresees expressly that if the parties fail to agree on the terms of and conditions of the deal in the next step on the promissory agreement, the deposit should be refunded. So this is something that we ask you, please do not sign these documents without proper legal advice. Well, due diligence, for the reasons I've mentioned, it's not a mandatory step for buying a property in Portugal, but it's highly advisable to do that in order to investigate, to confirm the title and ownership, and if there are or no encumbrances on the property, to see if there are no tax related with the property that are still outstanding, because those can still pass on to the buyer. So it is important to confirm the legal and tax situation of the property that you intend to buy. Ideally, this due diligence is done before you execute the promissory agreement. Sometimes this is not possible. The agents, the developers will pressure you to execute the agreement without doing the due diligence and ask you to do that due diligence after the promissory agreement. No problem. Execute the CPCV and do due diligence after. What is important is that the contract, the promissory agreement that you execute is actually conditions completion of the transaction to a positive outcome of such due diligence. For that due diligence, obviously, there is some documentation that needs to be provided by the vendor or by some or by the agent that will allow you to make that title search. Obviously, the type of due diligence that you carry out on a property will depend on the type of property. If you're talking about an apartment in a new development, okay, everything should be in order, there is no problem. But if you're buying an independent villa for renovation in a rural area, for example, well, there you need to look into more detail, especially if you're planning to refurbish or if you're planning to actually to buy a plot and to construct, then zoning conditions, planning conditions should also be assessed. You need to confirm this to see if actually what you're being sold allows you to execute the project that you want to. And then you have the promissory agreement. This is probably the most important document in the transaction. It's where the main terms and conditions are usually set. It involves the payment of a down payment and requires notarization. This down payment, well, it can go from 10% of the purchase price up to 50%. It depends on the project itself. Sometimes you're buying something that is still on paper, and so it's also common that you make an initial payment of 10%, and you will be asked at the later stage, and according to some construction milestones, to make some additional payments up to 50%, for example. This very much depends on the type of property that you are acquiring. Well, in order to execute these agreements, foreign citizens need to obtain a taxpayer number. So if you had not before obtained a taxpayer number for the golden visa purposes, you will need to get a taxpayer number to execute this promissory agreement that needs to be registered. Then we have the deed. The deed is actually the final purchase agreement. This is where the ownership title over the property is transferred from the seller to the buyer. Is usually executed by the notary and according to some notary's templates. And it's a simple and straightforward document, although this is the most important document, obviously, of the purchase. This is what gives you title. The deeds together with the registration, because in Portugal, in order for the acquisition to be effective towards third parties and to defend you from any problems, you should register the acquisition after you execute the deed. Costs. Well, there's the property transfer tax that is payable. It's usually of 6.5% on the purchase price. This can vary depending on the type of property, but this is a figure that you can take in consideration. Approximately 6.5%. It needs to be paid immediately before the transfer deed is executed. There is also stamp duty that needs to be considered, 0.8%, and there are also notary and registration fees that can vary, but I think we should consider at least 2,000 euros for such costs. There are also some tax implications after you become the owner of the property, because there is municipal tax that needs to be paid on an yearly basis and varies between 0.3% to 0.45%, depending on the location of the property. This is based on the taxable value of the property, not on the purchase price. The property transfer tax is paid upon the price of acquisition, but not this is on the taxable value of the property. I will just share the very short notes, because this has been already addressed and it will be addressed on a later stage. That there is this problem. Most of you have already heard about this non-habitual residence special tax regime that is open to any individual, including Portuguese, that have not been tax residents in Portugal for the previous 5 years. And if they become tax residents in Portugal, they can apply for this special tax regime. And this tax regime offers some benefits, some special taxation rules and some benefits to both Portuguese source income and foreign source income. So I think if of the benefit it provides, I think we would outline a 20% rate on the personal income tax for employment or high added value activities for independent, for if you are a doctor, if you are an engineer, manager of a company, you will be able, if we are talking about income originated in Portugal, you will have a 20% personal income tax. And you can also have a 28% rate for income coming from dividends, capital gains, and property income originated in Portugal. For the foreign sources of income, there is a personal income tax exemption for certain types of income, like employment, independent work, even capital gains, dividends, and property income, provided that some requirements are met. And one of those requirements being that such income is or may be taxed in the source country. What this grants is not is an exemption in Portugal for foreign in-source income. And there is, as Matthew already referred, there is a 10% rate for pensions and other similar forms of income. So we'll also thank you very much for your attention. We'll also be there throughout the day and making another presentation in the afternoon, and we'll be glad to have a chat and to respond to anything that you might want to know in more detail. Thank you very much.